Hi, everyone. This is Laura Jackson at Discovering Dyscalculia. And today I'm very excited because I have Lucy Knisley with me today to talk about one of her books. Lucy is a New York Times bestselling author. She's a critically acclaimed and award-winning comic creator. She lives in Chicago and she specializes in personal, confessional graphic novels and travelogues. And one of her books, actually two of her books, have been circulating my house with my two daughters. And this latest book, or not latest, this is second to latest, Stepping Stones is a middle grade book about a girl who moves from the city to a farm in the country, which is funny because it matches our own family's like similar recent story. But she has to contend with farm chores and wild animals and just a whole new family dynamic. So this is the book what we'll be talking about today. Thank you, Lucy, for coming on and joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So as I said, the books have been circulating my house, and my daughters just love the graphic novel style and the way you depict the emotions and feelings on the faces is just brilliant. So anyway, they were reading this one, and then they read is it Apple Crush?
Yes, that's
The next one. And they're right in that age frame, 13. Well, actually, they started reading these a couple years ago, so preteen and now teen.
excellent.
But my youngest daughter, the one who's not dyscalculic, she came up to me and she was like, there's some scenes in here, and I'm wondering if the character in this book is dyscalculic. She's struggling to make out the change at the farm stand, and seems like she has trouble memorizing her multiplication tables. And it also seems like, but she wasn't sure because nobody was saying, anything about it, and the character was feeling kind of frustrated by it. So she said, "Do you think this character is dyscalculic?" And she hadn't gotten to the end of the book where you talk about that. But I wondered, is this a scene from your own experience, your own growing up, or is this, and did you expect people to do what my daughter did and notice that it could be a sign of a math learning disability?
I certainly did. Yeah, it's completely straight out of my own experiences, and that's why I put that bit at the end. And I
Yeah.
didn't include it in the content of the book because it's true to my experience that people weren't talking about it back then. People didn't know how to recognize it, and people often overlooked it. And to be honest, that's still happening a lot today. So I wanted
Yeah.
this frustration, and I wanted you to see Jen's sort of anger and anxiety about it,
Yeah.
and sort of mounting panic that she has in these situations,
The little steam coming
without a
off her head.
yeah, sort of like emanating
Yeah.
these. And it's the best I could do to sort of reach back through time and connect with that experience that I had as a younger person growing up with dyscalculia, and
Yeah.
understanding that kind of anxiety and frustration. But I also wanted there to be a sort of note from the future in the back of the book saying, like, hey, if you are experiencing similar situations to this,
Yeah.
like, you may have a learning disability related to math. And
Yeah.
um, for me, I didn't get diagnosed until I was much, much older than Jen is in the book. So I wanted to try and help kids connect with that a little earlier.
How did you find out? So you were having trouble in math, but not having trouble in a lot of other areas. You're creative, you're writing, you're drawing, and so how was that as a kid? And then how did you find out that there was like a reason for the math?
Um, so I I went to four different high schools.
Oh my gosh.
When I was in eighth grade, I I struggled so much in math. I had this really frustrated teacher who taught me in seventh and eighth grade who just did not know
Yeah.
what to make of me. She'd like explain something on the board, the rest of the class would understand it, and then I'd
Yeah.
just be like, I don't know, like, I didn't know
Yeah.
what I did.
Yeah.
Um, and uh, and she just like she couldn't. I just remember her face and like looking at her, and she's just like, I, what is wrong with this
Oh
kid?
my gosh.
Um,
That must have been a weird feeling as a kid.
oh, It
Because
was
you're like,
bizarre. But besides the
yeah,
fact that like I was kind of the favorite among other teachers, like my
yeah,
English teacher was like, she's so creative and she loves to
yep.
write and tell stories, and
Hmm.
that's so great. And then I had this math teacher who was like, there's something wrong. Like, what is going on with this kid? I just explained this to her and she just did not understand it.
Yeah.
And I'd take my homework back and I just like sit there and look at it and just get more and more anxious about it and then just not do it and bring it back to
Yes.
like, wait a minute. But for my English teachers, I was bringing back, pages and pages extra of what they'd assigned me. So
Yep.
they couldn't figure out what was going on with me. They knew that there was some kind of learning disability, though. They didn't
Okay.
know how to diagnose it. And my mother, who's always been very supportive of me, was like, "Oh, she's just an artist. Like
Yeah.
she's fine. She's just an artist."
Yep.
So my school ended in eighth grade, and they were like, "You should send this kid to a school for like learning challenged kids, for kids that need
Mm,
extra help." And my
yeah.
mom was like, "I don't think she has a learning disability,
Yeah.
but I guess you're right." So I was sent to a school for kids with learning disabilities, a boarding school.
Okay.
That's where everyone went after my eighth grade. They all went to boarding schools, and this is the East Coast, so it was a lot of schools that were very like, prep schools with
Yes, I've been hearing about the East Coast schools. Yeah.
and my mom had gone to boarding school as a kid, so she was like, "Oh yeah, this seems right." But the place that she sent me, this boarding school, in the early aughts, was underwater because
Okay.
they did not know. I mean, arguably it's a lot better now, but at the time they didn't know how to handle this influx of more and more kids that were being diagnosed
Yeah.
and medicated. So there were a lot of
Yep.
kids who were like on a lot of medications, and
Right.
it was creating a lot of problems emotionally. And then they were
Yep.
just sent away from their homes at age 14 to live
Yeah.
in the woods.
Yeah.
Um,
So you had that mix of like a lot of behavioral differences and that also weren't very supportive,
yes,
all together with kids with reading or math issues who may or may not have the same kind of behavioral like
yeah.
experience. Yeah.
And the schools really specialized in like learning disabilities that dealt with reading and writing.
Yeah.
So I show up and they're like, "Oh, you're fine. You're fine.
Yeah.
We're gonna go put out these fires of all these other kids that are really, really struggling. Age
Uh-huh.
14, they can't read, they can't write. They're really, really having a tough time like concentrating or say sitting in class or with like extreme
Yeah.
emotional problems." Um, and so I was like, "Okay,
Yeah.
don't mind me. I'm gonna like go play the guitar in my dorm room."
Yeah.
So for this whole year, I sort of flew under the radar, and
Yeah.
nobody diagnosed me. There were all these resources at the school, extra help and stuff like that, but nobody was really paying attention to the math aspect of things. They were
Yeah.
focused on other kind of learning disabilities.
Yeah.
Um, so it was at the point where they left a group of students in Boston overnight on a field trip that my mom said, "I don't think this is
Oh,
the right
something.
situation to put my 14-year-old kid in."
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they had there was some mix up and they ended up just leaving like six or seven of us in in the city of Boston overnight.
Oh my
Um,
word.
so I really appreciated that school and sort of being exposed to kids with their own struggles
Yeah.
and having a better understanding of learning disabilities at the time. But again, it was sort of like I just sort of flew by under the
Yeah.
radar.
Yeah.
So I was then my mom transferred me to the local public school, but because I
Okay.
was coming from a school that specialized in learning disabilities, they put me in special ed at the public school. So the special ed program was an underfunded public school special ed program
Yeah.
where they were dealing with a lot of kids with a lot of severe learning disabilities and learning differences and like intellectual
Yeah.
problems and communication problems. And sort of I showed up and was like, "Oh, I this is not also meant for me," sort of
Yeah.
thing. And the teachers could recognize that.
Yeah.
Uh, so they would sort of just send me away during class while they dealt with a lot of the other students that were
Same kind of similar thing in a like
similar thing.
redo. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wasn't in class for the whole
Yeah.
first half of my sophomore year, because they were just like, you don't need to be here.
Yeah.
So my mom took me out of that school and put me into a local prep school. And this was a school with like uniforms and lots
Mhm.
of sports and very sort of rigid structure on what they
Yep.
wanted from their students. And I was not into this at all. I
Yeah.
was like not comfortable with it. Again, I was struggling in math, but doing fine in my other classes. But at this point, I had come to really distrust my educators because they
Yeah.
just didn't know what to make of me in a lot of
Yeah.
cases. And I was so sort of frustrated and anxious about math and
Yeah.
I
Like,
did
you
not
don't know what's going on either. Like,
right,
you're like, "I don't."
I was like I seem to hate school. This
Yeah.
is interesting. I liked it when I was a kid, like
Yeah.
um and the science as well. In At this point in high school, there was a lot of
So
math
much
involved,
math.
physics
So
and
much
stuff,
math.
so I started to be like, math and science not for me.
Yeah.
And I found my sanctuary in art and writing,
Yeah.
and that became sort of the teachers that I could trust, the
Mhm.
classes that I could trust. But the school had a lot of math and science, and
Yeah.
they also, required me to do a sport after school, and they required me. They were a boarding school, but I was trying to be a day student, and they
Yeah.
wanted me to like spend the night there, and they wouldn't allow me to have a car, even though I lived 45 minutes away and my mother worked. So I
Yeah.
would like park down the street and walk to school, and they
Yeah.
wouldn't allow me to have an after school job, which I had. It was all this stuff. So
Yeah. So many rules.
I made it a couple months at that
Yeah.
school. Um, and at this point, this is my third high school.
Yeah.
Uh, my parents didn't know what to make of this.
Yeah.
My teachers didn't know what to make of this. I didn't know what to make of this. I was basically like, I think school is not for me. This is
Yeah.
not where I want to be, what I want to do.
Yeah.
I was really saved by this art school. It was basically an art magnet school that allowed kids to pick a major in high
Yeah.
school.
Okay.
And I got to choose art and spend a lot of my time doing art. And I still had to do math and science, but I had
Yeah.
more understanding teachers who understood that there were kids that learned differently.
Yeah.
Um, I still managed to flunk out of Algebra 2
Uh-huh.
at this art school, and I
Yeah.
was asked to repeat it and would have flunked it again in my senior year, but I had already gotten into art school at this point, and my teacher was like, you know what? Like, you're going to art school, kid. Like, I was in my summer school Algebra 2 program trying to like make up for this class that I
Yeah.
failed so that I could just get my diploma and go.
Yeah.
And she was like, you didn't pass the summer program, but you're
Yeah.
going, like, you have to go to college.
Yeah.
And she just sort of signed the thing that let me go.
Yes, I have heard
Well,
that happen. Yes. Yep.
right? Thank God for these
This
teachers.
is
Because
not
they're like,
happening and we can't hold this person back. Yeah.
exactly. Like, this kid's already in art school. A pretty good likelihood that she's not going to need Algebra 2 that much. And it'll be okay. So I was in college when I first started reading about dyscalculia and being like, oh,
Okay.
yes, definitely that, definitely
Yeah.
have that. I was taking like a psychodynamic psychology class in art school. I went to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, which has this great liberal arts program and writing program and all these kinds of things. So
Oh,
I could
wow.
take
Yeah.
interesting courses that were out of like the University of Chicago and Columbia and things like that. So I
Yeah.
was taking a psychodynamic psychology class, and they started talking about all these different learning disabilities. And I was like, did you just say something about like a math-based learning disability? And
That
started
sounds like me. I'm sorry. Did you
right,
say math learning disability? Is that a thing? Yeah.
interesting. And the basic explanation of like, oh yeah, it's like dyslexia for math was very like,
Yeah.
oh, is this very basic thing, but immediately cottoned onto it and
Mhm.
started seeing a psychiatrist, and they were like, oh, definitely from your experiences alone, I could tell you that you have this.
Yeah.
And it's been really interesting because the way that I incorporate math into my life as a comic artist, you have to measure out the pages with the margins of the gutters of the panels. That's
Yeah.
algebra. And
Yes.
the way that I've had to integrate math into my life and my career is so interesting because having this experience of just being told, like, you know what, you're an artist, you're not going to need this thing that's really difficult for you. And
Mhm.
then finally just being able to learn it enough on my own to
Mhm.
apply it to the things that I wanted to do was
Yeah.
such a revelation for me, where I was like, oh, the the teachers really didn't understand that I wasn't processing this the same
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, I was gonna say that whole like there wasn't an understanding that it's about like not having a sense for quantity and estimation and numbers. Like it's like they don't really understand that. It seems like that would have been so helpful for you growing up if those art teachers could have been like, and this is where you would use, like as we're laying out the art pieces, like this is where we would incorporate math, like making it really relevant to you. Seems like it could, but I mean, nobody's even doing that today. So, back when you were in school, probably not.
No,
What do
I
you
do
think that?
remember that teacher that hated me in middle school.
Mm,
She'd have like the logic puzzles in math, and I
oh,
remember being really, really good at them. Like
yeah.
the grid, which is all
Mm-hmm.
visual and
Mm-hmm.
all like it works this part of your brain that does not have to deal with quantified numbers and
Yes.
like amounts. And I remember being really good
Yeah.
at them, and other kids in my math class really struggling with them and being like,
Yeah.
oh, like this is a word problem, I don't understand it, and just being like, no, this is amazing. It's the one
Yes.
thing in my math class that I can do.
Yes. Sometimes I hear stories, the kids are coming to their parents and saying, I saw this on YouTube or I read about this in a book. Do you think this is me? I've had families come in and that it's never been on the radar of the parent, but the kid like recognizes it. So that's huge. But then what about the grown-ups? Like, do you have anything you would share with them about being a professional, being a successful author, an artist, and being dyscalculic? How do you think about that? And how do you really encourage those sides that you're amazing at?
Well, for me, I see these sort of things happening with kids spreading this information more and sort of trying to
Yeah.
understand their brains and the way that they learn much
Yeah.
more than when I was growing up. And the stigma is much less as well to
Yeah.
embrace neurodivergency, which is so cool.
Yes. Yes.
Um, the one thing that I get nervous about with adults is that there's this real resistance to it,
Yes.
not just for themselves, but for their kids to be like, well, no, 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 there's nothing wrong with my kid. There's
Oh
nothing
my
wrong with
gosh.
me.
You are so right, Lucy. Yes. Yes. Yes.
And, it makes me so sad because it seems to me such a progression in society for people to be embracing different types of neurodivergency and to be trying to better understand and open up education to people that learn in different ways, because it can only improve everyone's style of learning, and it can only improve our way of connecting with one another.
Yes.
So to speak to an adult who would have some kind of resistance to this, or who would maybe just be starting to understand their own different way of processing the world, is that there's so much to be learned from younger people in the way that they're embracing it and the way
Yeah.
that we're finally getting to see kids growing up with an acceptance of that kind of learning difference that we didn't have as
Yeah.
adults. And it just boggles my mind. And I will say that there are so many neurodivergent comic artists. So I work in a field where there are tons and tons of people that have really embraced their own neurodivergency and
Yeah.
different styles of learning. Specifically, there are a lot of us that are dyscalculic, and
Yeah.
I feel like there's some sort of connection that's formed early on where you feel this rejection from a certain
Mhm.
aspect of your education, and you really try and embrace this other way of doing it. But comics is also this real control. It's a controlled art. It's
Okay.
a
Yeah.
way of putting life in these little boxes, of trying
Yeah.
to describe feelings and emotions, things that are very messy and hard to
Yeah.
quantify, in a way that not only is an expression, but a form of communication.
Yeah.
And in that way, it is really singular in its art. It's not just visual art; it's a storytelling art. And
Hmm.
I think that there's something that clicks over in your brain when you have uh, difficulty grasping certain concepts, but
Yeah.
a different concept is wide open to you in a way that
Yeah.
another person might not be able to grasp. And for me, that's been comics, this way
Yeah.
of storytelling, of communicating
Uh-huh.
that allows me to share an experience with a reader.
Yeah.
And I know people that feel that way about math, and it's
Yeah.
so interesting to me that they're like, it's this universal language. It helps me better understand the world, and I'm like, that's how I feel about comics.
Yeah.
And it's so cool because I have something like that, and I feel
Yeah.
like most people can find that different concept
Hmm.
that they can really grasp.
Yeah. It reminds me of when my daughter was 10. So she was 9 when we started, when I first even heard about a math learning disability and when we started wondering about all the struggles she was having. But when she was 10, after we had like confirmed it and we're like learning more about it together, I remember her standing on the front door of our steps of our tiny house in Seattle. And she was like, oh, she's like, I know what has happened. She was like, my artistic, creative side of my brain has just gotten so big. It has just smushed out all the math, and there is no room for all that math stuff. Like, she just was like, she had said it with like such confidence and such. And I thought, she could be totally right. Like, I don't know how the brain works, but that makes a lot of sense to me because she did just have, she was just like oozing creativity, and loved storytelling and art similarly. So, um, I think you're right. There's probably something that happens when you are faced with that challenge, and then it really helps grow that, just even that emotional intelligence to be able to convey the thoughts and feelings. Like I mean, I said this before, but I love your facial expressions, the wide eyes, there's just so many, it's so expressive. You can feel, like I was rereading it last night again, and um I could just resonate and feel all of her um frustrations. And also maybe because I have teen girls right now, so a lot of the like pushback behavior, and the outbursts, I'm like, oh yeah. It's so good. So yeah, no, that's interesting to think about. Looking to our students who are actually doing a better job at embracing their strengths and also accepting their areas of challenge, just like a whole picture, and for us adults to be taking our cues from them, is a really good idea.
Yes. I mean, everybody sort of has this negativity bias where they want to be like, I suck at this. I'm terrible at this.
Yeah.
I'm not good at it. I'm not good at it. And I wanted to emphasize in this story that Jen really struggles with certain things, but she's very good at other things. And
Yeah.
those things aren't something that everybody can do. I
No.
mean, I can't tell you how often people find out what I do for a living and their immediate response is to say, I can't draw a straight line or I can't draw a stick
Yeah.
figure. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, why would you want to draw a stick figure or a straight line? Like,
Yeah.
I draw those things for my job. That's not what I do.
Yeah,
Um,
I watched a video of you online drawing a picture of your baby, and it was like it looked so effortless, and I was like, yeah, no, that would not be for me. But I
right.
loved it.
But it's
Yeah.
practice. I mean, and people ask me, like, how did you get it? And it's like, it's practice, it's muscle memory. And I think that when people are good at something, they want to practice it and they
Yeah.
get better and better and practice and practice. And sometimes I'll draw something and I'll be like, I'm terrible and cannot draw anything. And it's still like, as a professional
Yeah.
with published books, I've
Yeah.
done this every day of my career. Had a moment where I'm like, I can't draw. And
I hear my
uh,
daughter saying that too, but I look at what she draws and I'm like, what are you talking about? But it's a feeling that she's experiencing. Yeah.
exactly, it's a feeling and not always reflective of reality. And that's something that I wanted to indicate in this book, that Jen experiences a great deal of anxiety
Yeah.
about one portion of her life, but this realization that she might be doing well at something that other people don't excel at is something that I wanted to kind of highlight in the book.
Yeah. I love there's that scene where the dad of the stepsisters comes in and like swipes off the board and like draws some ugly sign as if that's fine. And I was just like, he can't even see there was like a beautiful sign and then like just chicken scratch, It's just, yeah.
And
Um,
that's the thing, is that like that's the way that people feel about certain aspects that they just can't grasp. They're just
Yeah.
like, that's why would that be important? Why would that be important?
Yeah.
Whereas math is it's such a staple in society. It is this kind of like universally taught, uh,
Mm-hmm.
universally understood that you're supposed to just get it at a certain point.
Yeah.
And it's also this measurement of intelligence for so much of
Yes.
childhood that like, oh, that kid's really smart. You should see him do math.
Yes.
Um, that it's much more universally understood
Yeah.
that to be good at math is to be smart, and much less embraced, though I think that is changing,
I
to
hope
be
so.
an excellent communicator or a good artist or being able to express yourself or your emotions and have
Yep.
emotional intelligence. And I really, really think that that is improving. And I think that education is embracing that more, and our understanding of intelligence is evolving.
Yeah.
Uh, but that was not always the case. And I wanted
No.
to indicate these different types of intelligence, and
Yeah.
that not all of them are recognized equally.
No. I love it. It's so good.
Thank you.
What are you working on right now? What's coming up next from
Um,
you?
the third book in the
Oh,
Peapod Farm series. So it's
nice. Okay.
Apple Crush is the first, or Apple Crush is the second.
Uh-huh.
Stepping Stones is the first, and I'm working on the third, probably final of this book series.
Okay.
And I'll continue on making other things. So I'm working on that right now. I'm about to finish the pencils for this book. So I write the script, then I draw the
Okay.
pencils, then I ink it, and then it's colored by a colorist, and then
Okay.
that's the book.
Yeah.
Um, so this third one, the first one was dealing with Jen, sort of her personal anxieties and
Yeah.
this big transition that she was going
Huge
through.
transition. Yeah.
The second one is more about being understanding that your family is going to have different interests and different focus than you. So it's more
Yeah.
about Jen's friendship with her sisters, and this kind of different developmental stage where you're kind of neither fish nor fowl, which is something that's always really interested me about, like a 12-year-old kid that
Yeah.
you're on the precipice of something, and
Yeah.
there's a
Yep.
weird like difference of expectation in your life that
Yep.
you're expected to be an adult in certain situations but still be a kid in others.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
and
very
then this
tricky.
third one deals more with the blended families, so the first one kind of being about Jen alone, the second one
Hmm.
being about Jen together, and the third one being really about Jen's family.
Yeah. A group kind of. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, my kids will be excited to see that.
good.
So,
Thank you.
and I'm sure all the other families watching this too. So, um, where can people find you? Where can they find your work and give me all that scoop?
Sure. My website is Lucy Knisley, spelled KNISLEY.com. I have a lot of stuff there. I'm on social media and put little comics mostly about my brilliant child.
How
uh,
old is your child? Can I ask how old your
my
child
child
is
is
now?
7. Uh,
Okay.
they're incredible,
Yeah.
genius, neurodivergent in like so many cool ways.
Yeah. So
Just
fun.
like
Love it.
blows my mind every single day. Um, and is so fun and great and really interesting. Uh,
Hmm.
and I have to like restrain myself from making comics about them all the time.
I
I don't want to be
understand.
like
No, that
the
makes sense.
mom that's there with the notebook, like watching her
Yeah,
every, but
I know.
they're really
It's
funny.
I also want to say that the cover page or the front page, homepage on your website is so beautiful. Like everyone
Okay.
should go check it out. The art is just stunning. And I don't know, when I saw it, I was like, ooh, I love this. It makes you want to just look at everything in there. So it's very
It's
cool.
sort of a piece of art on a messy desk, which, as you can see,
Yeah.
is um, sort of true to form, like embraced.
It looked like an artist's desk. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's awesome. Well, thank you for chatting today, and thank you for opening up about like just both what you love and also just the impact of being neurodiverse yourself. And I just think it's so encouraging for students and adults. All right. Thank you, Lucy.
Well, thank you. My pleasure.